Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Hello. Danny, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you today?
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for having me, Rafael. And more importantly, thanks a lot for spreading joy and positivity in the world. We need a lot more of Rafael, a lot less of the negativity I see.
I appreciate that. You know, you're so right. We do have so much negativity, and that's why I'm excited to talk to you. I'm telling you, we have so much to talk about. I think you wrote 3,000 books. You know, you're known in the industry. You know, from reading your bio, Jim Carrey with a Ph.D. So I know we're going to have some laughs. I know we're going to talk about some serious stuff. And you even just brought it up right away, how we need to have that positivity in our lives, right? But we need to smile more often, don't we?
Yeah, I learned that as a kindergarten teacher. I always tell people I take my job seriously. I don't take myself seriously because I ain't all that, and neither are you. If you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for a week. Those little ones will set you straight. I once had a little girl, LaShonda. She raises her hand. I'm like, LaShonda, question. And she's like, Miss Brassell, when are you going to trim your nose hair? I'm like, this afternoon. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Not all that.
You know, the beauty of kids is that they're honest, right?
Absolutely. No filter.
No filter. And it's they are the funniest ones around.
Absolutely.
But we got to give them a chance to go ahead and be funny, right?
Absolutely. Let those personalities burst out all the time. And they say amazing things. I always talk about, I had this beautiful little girl, Maya. She comes up to me at recess one day and she's like, Miss Brassell, this is Anjanae. Anjanae is Nikisha's friend. Nikisha is my friend. So that means Anjanae's my friend too. I'm like, wow, what a lovely way to look at the world.
Right.
You know, I really kind of think the kids have it a lot better than the adults.
They do. Until, unfortunately, adults start to put that negativity in, right? Yeah, it's terrible. So how do we stop that? I'm just curious. Any ideas?
Well, I was watching this horrible show on TV a couple of weeks ago called The News. And
I don't watch that anymore.
In a foul mood. And so that's the first tip I always give people is turn off the TV news and read a funny children's book. You'll impress your friends. You can say, oh, I read a book cover to cover last night. They're like, really? What was it about? It was about this little red hen. You know, we got to keep it. And I mean, kids don't care about it. It drives me nuts that my 3 kids know about politics now because politics has been dominating lately. I'm like, you're a kid. You shouldn't care about politics. You should be doing things that are fun and being goofy.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you're so right. I've had kids ask me during time to vote, they're like, who are you voting for? I'm like, hello? Who are you voting for? And they're like, well, if I had a vote, and then I always ask them why. And it's, you know, usually it's not their own opinion, it's their parents' opinion, obviously. Except for the kids whose house is divided, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So my gosh, you written, like I said, 500,000 books. You were a kindergarten teacher. I just found this out, and you have a PhD. So let's go into all of that. But let's first start off with, we're talking about kids. When you were a kid, what do you recall? What was the fondest memory as a kid? And then who would you say influenced you the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that, Rafael. So it's kind of ironic. I'm considered America's leading reading ambassador. And the reason that's ironic is because I grew up hating reading. My father was a librarian, and I always hated the public library growing up. You know, the seats were always uncomfortable. It always had a weird smell. There was
Mm.
always some elderly woman telling me to be quiet. There's always some homeless guy thinks he's a vampire hanging out by the bookshelves. I always hated the public library. It wasn't until I started teaching in the inner city, Rafael, where I saw that a lot of my kids didn't have a lot of the basic advantages that I had and that I took for granted. I mean, I didn't grow up rich. We were lower middle class, but we always had food on the table.
Mm.
And my parents were both in the home, and they read to us in front of us, and we had plenty of access to materials. And I just realized, wow, a lot of people take for granted all those basic advantages. And so that really became my passion. I find that schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask people is, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read because I've never had to tell a kid, go watch TV. I've never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. And I never want to have to tell a kid, go read a book. I want them to choose to do it on their own because they love it. And so that's really my passion. In terms of people that had the greatest impact, I mean, obviously my parents always had the greatest impact on my life. I actually had a teacher in 7th grade by the name of Will Hobbs. And Will Hobbs, he wound up becoming a best-selling young adult author. And Will was the first guy to get me interested in reading. He had about 5,000 books in his classroom. And every day at the beginning of class, he would tell us what he was reading. We would tell him what we were reading. And the rest of the 50-minute period, we read. Whenever we finished a book, we'd go up to Mr. Hobbs. He'd put down the book he was reading, look through our book, ask us 3 or 4 questions. If he thought our answers were all right, he gave us a point. Every book up to 200 pages was worth 1 point. Every extra 100 pages is worth another point. You needed 25 points to get an A, and the top 5 point totals had their names written on the board. And I wanted my name written on that board.
Yes.
You know what? 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, 500-page book, 4-point book. Also, an excellent Disney film starring James Mason and Kirk Douglas. I didn't really feel like reading a 500-page book, so I took the book up to Mr. Hobbs. He asked me 4 questions, and I learned a valuable lesson that day, Rafael.
What's that?
Ain't always like the movies. And Mr. Hobbs gave me the 4 points, and that was a great teaching trick. It taught me, guilt works, because I read every word of every page of every book from that point forward. Wound up with 44 points, went well above and beyond what I had to do. He used the greatest strategy I've ever seen a teacher use to get a kid excited about reading. Found out what I was interested in, which was football. And at least once a week, he'd give me a book. He's like, hey, Danny, check out this book on John Elway. I think you'll like it. What are the odds I open up that book? In my experience with all ages, 100%. Kid might not read it, but they're going to open it. And also, by the 4th or 5th time I do that with a kid, those kids usually try and read that book because there's nothing more powerful than somebody significant in your life, a teacher, a coach, a parent, a pastor, an older sibling saying, you know what? I was thinking of you when I was reading this. So I've been blessed. I've had wonderful mentors. I mean, I love your show because we're talking about coaches. And I'm like, show me one successful person in life that didn't have coaches that guided that person along that path.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I love the answer, by the way, but you still skirted. Tell me about your childhood.
I had a great childhood. I loved it.
What was your fondest memory?
Well,
going to the library.
I'm going to give you a different story. So I was speaking in India at a school, and I was telling the kids how to get pumped up and how they can accomplish anything in life. And this little boy comes up to me. He's missing, he only has a stump for his left arm, and he has tears in his eyes. He's like, Danny, how can I succeed? And I said, well, I don't usually share this story, but I said, when I was your age, I went to 18 different schools. They kept on calling me stupid because I stuttered. And I eventually wound up going to a school where the teacher, she would sing things to me and I would sing them back without my stutter. And eventually I lost the stutter and became a swan. It's kind of like the movie The King's Speech. But I looked at that little boy and I said, isn't it interesting that the little boy who they said was stupid and couldn't talk right now gets paid exorbitant amounts of money to travel the world, getting paid to do what? To speak. And he just had this big grin. I'm like, don't ever let anybody tell you what you cannot do. There's just so many examples of people that overcame obstacles. And I mean, that's what I hope your audience is listening for, is that, we got to get excited about the uncomfortability. We got to get excited about the adversity. That's what makes us stronger, and that's what's going to make us better.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So tell me, who would you say when you were young, who would you say was one person who totally influenced you that you said when you look back and you go, wow, it's because of this person. Of That's why I am who I am.
Gosh,
Was it that teacher? Was it
powerful
someone
question.
else?
Very tricky, because I've had, I see. I actually had wanted to create my own nonprofit called Five Mentors, where I give every kid a coach, a teacher, a
Mm,
pastor, somebody.
wow.
Because I realized that a lot of kids don't have those things. I had great. I mean, my football coach, my offensive line coach Norm Putnam, my head coach Brian Hester, they had a tremendous impact on me.
Mm,
The principal at my high school, Bobby Wright, had a huge impact on me. In college, I took my freshman year in college. I was a political science major, but I took Steve Taylor's journalism class because
mm.
the basketball team took that class, so I knew it was an easy A. And one night he kept me after class and he said, "Danny, I really wish you'd change majors. You're the best writer I've ever read." Well, that
Mm,
comment got me to switch majors, and Steve was the person to get me my first job as a journalist.
wow.
My mother, probably, you know what, I'm going to say mom. Mom is
Mm,
probably the most significant, because, my mom never stops talking. People think I talk a lot. I never had a chance growing up. My mother's never received a piece of mail that she did not feel compelled to read aloud to every single person in the room. She'll be like, "Hey, Danny, you remember Mrs. Huffnagel? She died 4 years before you were born. I just got a letter from her daughter. Let me read this to you. I have no interest in this whatsoever." She'll read aloud every single newspaper article she finds fascinating. Fascinating. She'll be like, "Hey, Danny, you see the Lakers won last night? Yeah, Mom, I read the article. Kobe scored 43. Did you read that? Yeah, Mom, I read the article. Powell had 12 boards. Mom, I read the article." And she gets more and more excited to read me something, and she was great. She wound up being a school board member. It was her and six guys, and there was a lot of 6-1 votes. And so she taught
mm,
me how to stand firm to my beliefs, and
yes.
how to be animated. She always had enthusiasm. We lost her actually almost a year ago today.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no. But I mean, she's great. And I was,
Right.
when I lost her, I always say this to people that lose a loved one. Dr. Seuss has a great quote. He says, "Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened." And I was so blessed to have her in my life.
It's a great, great way that you're looking at it, because a lot of people will mourn for a very long time, right? But instead of, and I always say the same thing, so you and I are basically thinking the same way, because I always say celebrate the moments, remember those. Those are the most important. Remember their smile, remember the funny things they did. Those are the things that keep them alive for me. My mom died when she was 86 and my dad at 91. But it's those simple moments that I recall. I don't recall the bad moments, right? I
Yeah,
try to get rid of those
yeah,
because you know what? Otherwise, it's going to be sad the whole time. So I remember the funny things. I remember the things that taught me a lesson, right? Whether it was good or bad, I still learned, because I always try to learn every day.
yeah,
And that's what books do for you, right? Every day, reading something. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I'm not reading a book or rereading a book, right?
What's your favorite book, Raphael?
Right now, I'm reading Think and Grow Rich,
Yeah,
probably for the
yeah,
thousandth time, and the Habit book. So I have a couple of different books, because authors are always sending me books. Which, by the way, I'm going to want one of your
yeah.
five
I'll
minutes,
send it to
one
you.
of them. We're going to talk about your first book and one of your last books, and then in between. And then, for me, the question is, I think everybody who takes the responsibility to truly engage the youngsters in us, right? I think they're superheroes. I think every kindergarten teacher is a superhero. Every elementary school teacher because they're truly shaping when we really, 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 really are becoming, when we are being shaped. And a lot of it's the lessons that we're being taught, you know, addition, subtraction, all that. Yes, that's important, but it's the little moments that that teacher will share with us, like that teacher telling you, hey, read this book, hey, read that book, hey, read this. Those moments will stick with us forever. So thank you for being a kindergarten teacher. And why did you choose that?
I didn't choose it, Rafael. I actually started off as a high school teacher.
Oh, you did. Okay.
I saw the movie Stand and Deliver, which, if your audience isn't
Oh,
familiar,
love
it's
it.
a true story of Jaime Escalante going to Garfield High School in East Los Angeles to teach
Hmm.
advanced placement calculus. So I said, I'm going to be Jaime Escalante. So I was originally hired to teach 12th grade social studies in Compton, California. It's a community in South Central Los Angeles. And they switched me from working with high school students to middle school students to upper elementary to lower elementary to pretty soon, instead of preparing students for college, I was coming home with snot marks all over my pants from my little one me all day. And, and it was great, Raphael, because I learned what works with a 12th grader does not necessarily work with a kindergartner. But
No.
what works with a kindergartner works with all age levels. I mean, one of the benefits of you and I are on the same wavelength. I mean, you have a choice every day: focus on the negative or focus on the positive. I look at the opportunities, and so the one great thing that COVID presented me was overnight I lost all of my speaking engagements.
Mm.
Never did I think that there wouldn't be public events. I was like, wow, that's amazing that happened.
Oh,
But fortunately, we have this type of technology like StreamYard, like we're using right now, and Zoom, and and Microsoft Teams, and all these different things.
mhm.
And it actually opened up the entire world to me. I would do interviews every day where I'm like Nigeria, then Nepal, then South Carolina. It was crazy. And to make extra income, I started working with executives on their speaking skills and how to spice up their speeches, become more confident or whatever. And that's become like one of my favorite things to do now. I get to work with all kinds of entrepreneurs and people who, because I truly believe that your communication skills are one of the most vital. They call them soft skills, but I'm like, what? There's nothing soft about them. If you can communicate, especially as a speaker, and move people, you're gonna be successful. And so I've been very blessed with that in my life. And I'm using the same principles I use with my students, because with a kindergartner, you have about 7 minutes to have their attention, and then you have to move on to the next thing. It's constant. I always call kindergarten teachers, it's New York, New York. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, because you can't stink. I mean, as you progress in education, they allow teachers to be lazy and not very good. And I never put down teachers, just because I think teachers, we give them the shaft all the time. I read something on social media the other day I thought was great. It says, we don't have a teacher shortage. We have a shortage of people with master's degrees willing to work for $30,000 a year and no accolades. And that's exactly right. We love to dump everything on the teachers. And I was hoping that the pandemic was going to make the millions of parents out there who all of a sudden were forced to involuntarily homeschool their kids. I wanted them to realize, now try doing it with 33 different kids in your classroom all day. I mean, it's not easy. And so I love that you're talking about the importance of teachers. It's something. And I always tell people, no matter what you do, you're always a role model and a teacher, and there's no higher calling. Ooh, you're muted, Raphael.
Thank you for that.
There
So,
you go.
when we compare kindergarten teachers to even eighth grade teachers, it's a huge difference, because the learning curve is already changed so drastically, but the creativity has to be there more in kindergarten, right? Because you have to liven them up. I mean, how many? I remember when I dropped off my kid even to pre-K, he was just crying the whole
Yeah,
time. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I leave this kid? But I knew I had to leave him. And then, I know a few minutes later, he's going to be okay. But
yeah,
then the teachers have to deal with that, is the kid missing the parent, and then trying to engage them, and then coming up with all different creative ways to keep them engaged and not say, oh, I need my mommy or my daddy. and to say, you know what, let me have some fun, let me learn something, and even draw inside the box. But forget the box. I'm just going to draw. I'm going to draw on the guy next to me. Whatever. It doesn't matter, right? So that creativity, I think, is so super important, and a lot of it kind of gets put aside when we get into the higher grades. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you reminded me of one of my little boys when I was teaching second grade. I had a little boy, Jose, and Jose was crying on the first day of school. He didn't want to leave his mom, and on the last day of school, he was crying because he didn't want to leave me. That was great. You're right about it. It's tragic to me. I'm like, what's going on in this country? My kindergartners used to go to bed with their backpacks on. They were so excited to go to school.
Right.
Meanwhile, my eighth graders were trying to think of ways to get sick. Like, what happened in those 8 years to get that kid to hate school so much? I mean, if I'm doing my job, my students should be banging on my door at 6 a.m. every day. They're so excited to come in, and they should be in tears when they hear that final bell. It was Carl Jung who said, if there's something we wish to change in the child, we should first examine it and see whether it's something that could be better changed in ourselves. I mean, we love to judge really quickly, but kids, you were right on there. And you started the broadcast, you were talking about that. The most important question I teach kids to ask is why. You should always ask why. And even teachers, I say, there's two types of teachers, the kind that say that's wrong, and the kind that ask, well, why did you say that? So, because in my experience, kids are usually right. They might be using a totally different rationale, but the more I can question them, the better I can serve them. I'll give you an example. I used to teach at a preschool in downtown Los Angeles called Para los Niños, serves homeless Latino families. And I had this little boy, Francisco, and on his little whiteboard, I wrote down Francisco and Papa. And in Spanish, I asked him to point to the word that said Papa, and he pointed to the word Francisco. And I asked him in Spanish, well, why'd you say that? And he's like, because it's bigger. Oh, he's associating the size of the word with the size of the person. That's interesting. I just love kids look at things a little bit differently all the time. And so, I always give the example when I was in kindergarten, Sister Rosanna asked us all if we wanted to go to heaven, and all of us raised our hands except for Hector. She's like, you don't want to go to heaven, Hector? He's like, oh, I thought you were talking about today. He's just looking at her question from a totally different point of view. But you're absolutely right there. That's such an important question. And kids give us brilliant answers all the time. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Why? I mean, as adults, don't we have to ask that all the time? Every day. Why am I doing this?
If you want to, if you want to stop thinking, surround yourself with people that think the same way you do. That's ridiculous. The reason I love the United States is because of our diversity. You're forced to be around people that are different, that have different viewpoints. I mean, and that's one of the lessons. If I was training Congress and the president, I would train them. We need to learn how to be able to disagree in this country without being disagreeable in this country. You and I can disagree, but we can still be loving and respectful of one another, and just appreciate that we might have different points of view on certain subjects. Even my wife and I love her to death, but we don't agree on everything. We're not supposed to agree on everything. You need to surround yourself with people that think differently, especially your audience, because when you get that coach that's able to push you in a different direction, you're like, I never considered that before. You got to get comfortable becoming uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I do not like is yes people. Do me a favor, don't yes me. And you please don't agree with me if you really don't, right? It's okay to have your own opinion, and it's okay to be different than me. And even if I am teaching you something, you can question my teaching. You can say, why are you saying it that way? What do you really also find out? What is it that I'm really telling you? Right. So one of the things I teach kids from all ages, because I am a martial arts instructor. So
I love it.
I take them. Yeah, thank you. I take them from 3.5. I used to take them at 2, but I don't have enough help for that area. But
bodily functions at 2.
Here's the thing. And I have kids who are now with me. They're 16, 15, 14, 17, who were with me when I used to take the 2-year-olds. They're still with me, right?
That's awesome.
And somebody said to me about Jeffrey, they said, well, how long have you known Jeffrey? I said, all his life. He's 17. And they're like, really? I'm
Wow.
like, yeah, he came to me when he was 2. So basically his whole life. And Jeffrey goes, yeah, I know Sifu forever. And I'm like, and is that good or bad? He goes, it's great. So one of the things I'm always inspiring them to question. You have to question.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that happens a lot is kids are the best investigators. They're always asking why,
Mm-hmm.
why. And then what happens is adults stop telling them, stop saying that, stop saying that, don't ask me that, don't ask, you don't need to know, blah, blah, blah. So what happens is later on, they become young adults. They barely talk.
Yeah.
They're just into their phone, their Xbox, their PS4 or 5 or 50, whatever number we're up to. And they're not inquisitive anymore. And we need to bring that back. I want people asking me. It's not because I said it, and don't take my word for it. Find out if I'm right. Question it. And I love that. So thank you for bringing that up, because that's important.
Well, I love everything you just said there, Rafael. I mean, think about it. Someday Jeffrey's going to be on a podcast and somebody's going to ask him, who's the person that changed your life as a child? And he'll say, Master Sifu. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Maybe.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah. One of the things that, and I'm with you 1,000% on the reading aspect. For me, I came from Colombia, and you asked me earlier what part of Colombia. I came from Pereira, right?
Where's
So
Pereira?
Pereira is somewhere in Colombia. I'm going to tell you why, because I've become so Americanized. So I came when I was 8 years old, right? And I did not know English at all. And the school I went to, no one spoke Spanish.
Wow.
So that was that. So you can only imagine. And the thing is, my parents didn't even know that there was a bus that I should take. So my school was about 2 miles from home. So they showed me the first time, this is how you get to school. This is how you get back. Nobody ever took me to school.
Wow.
I did not know about, I think my first bus was maybe in 5th grade or 6th grade. I always walked to school,
Wow.
any school, right? So for me, it was not only, being bullied, being made fun of because I didn't understand what was going on. The hardest word for me, and I had a teacher who stepped in. I couldn't say the. THE. I couldn't say that.
DA would be
Yeah.
the Spanish.
Yeah, da. So she had me doing TH, the. It was like, huh? So, and so for me, it was truly learning by listening and adapting and seeing.
Yeah.
So that learning curve for me was really quick. I didn't have a choice. It wasn't like I can be like, we have so many immigrants who come to our country now, including my parents, which used to tick me off because they didn't care to learn the language. And I'm like, what are you, crazy? I'm not your interpreter, because I used to have to interpret for them, right?
Yeah.
But so for me, it's, if we come to another country, I think we have to get deep into it and start learning no matter how. Watch TV, do anything. Stop talking in your language at home and try to communicate with the other language of whatever. If I go to a different country, I'm going to submerge myself into the culture, into the language. I think to me that's important.
Yeah, I mean, and here's another way of looking at that too, because I mean, I like where you're going with it, because I always tell people, in order to succeed in America, you need to learn English.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely the fact. But here's the point I make to people: but it doesn't have to be at the expense of your home language, because if you
without a doubt,
look at the research,
Spanish.
the better you get in your first, the better you get in your first language, the more those skills will transfer to your second language. Mm-hmm. So I've always dealt with, when they sent me at my first elementary school, on the first day of school, principal said, Mr. Brassell, do you speak any Spanish? I'm like, un poquito. Says, good, you're our new bilingual coordinator. This was a school of 950 students, and 85% of them spoke Spanish as a first language. On the first day of school, they gave me 75 kids and said, we don't know what country they're from, what grade they're in. Can you figure it out? So I'm like, Maria, second thumb, go to kindergarten. Paco, mustache, go to 5th grade. I looked up my kids.
I love it.
Kids, you all know Spanish. I know English. We're all getting 2 languages this year. And I think that's the framework we should be using is, hey, let's make 2 statements that I think are true statements, like in geometry. This is a true statement. I think in order to prosper in America, it is very important that you learn English. I think everybody can agree on that. And then the second statement should be, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of your home language. I'm constantly emphasizing this to parents. I'm like, I want you speaking Spanish at home because it'll help your kid in the English. And people have to, for some reason, America is so xenophobic when it comes to language. I'm like, but language actually helps us, and the English language, the strength of the English language is it accepts words from other languages. It's kind of like a virus. It's spread around the world. And you see languages are starting to die off because English is taking over for those languages. I always talk about the history of the English language. 90% of the language is based on Latin and Greek roots, but I always tell people we need to embrace immigration and not fear it, because a lot of the vocabulary we get came from other languages. So, for example, we'd all have really dirty hair if it wasn't for our immigrants from India, because the word shampoo is a Hindi word. Thank goodness for our Arabic immigrants, because the word alcohol comes to us courtesy of Arabic. Slavic languages like Russian and Polish gave us words like stroganoff, vodka, robot. When Chuck Norris and his friends invaded England in the 9th century, the Vikings, they introduced all kinds of vocabulary like angry, angry cake, pretty, things like that. Les bosses from France, when William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066, not only did the French dominate English literature and culture for a couple of years, it also dominated the language. So we wouldn't be able to watch Law and Order if it wasn't for the French, because almost all legal courtroom terms come to us courtesy of French. We wouldn't have to pay taxes if it wasn't for the French, because the word tax actually comes to us from French. We'd have nothing to read because words like history, story, poetry, those are all French words. Dances with words also had a huge impact on the English language. So when these people from Europe came to the Americas and Australia and New Zealand, there was things here that they didn't have in Europe. So they just accepted the terminology. So they didn't have coyotes or kangaroos in Europe. So they just kept the words coyotes and kangaroo. I think it's 26 of our 50 states are actually Native American words like Alabama and Illinois. Are all Native American words. And so again, when I'll give you a perfect example, Rafael. I deal with a lot of Spanish speaking parents, and they feel ashamed to speak Spanish. I'm like, no, you should be proud of that. Languages contribute to one another. I mean, I'm stronger at English because I know Spanish. My Spanish, unfortunately, 25 years ago, I used to teach the entire day in Spanish. Now you really do start to lose it if you don't use it. But if I went to Mexico for about a month and a half, I think I'd probably pick it all back up.
Right back.
Here's a point I like to make to parents. Look at the letter A. Look at that symbol. What sound does it make in Spanish? Ah. Always ah. English. Ah. A. Ugh. Sounds like I'm about to vomit. That symbol makes 18 different sounds in English. Not a very useful strategy. Another thing I love about Spanish. Let's say I say in English, Maria is a beautiful woman. In Spanish, I would say Maria es una mujer hermosa or bella or bonita. Spanish, like English, has lots of synonyms. Look at both of those sentences. Look at the emphasis in the sentence. In the English sentence, Maria is a beautiful woman. The emphasis is on the adjective beautiful. In Spanish, I say Maria es una mujer hermosa. The emphasis is on the noun woman. Look at that. Spanish got it right. In English, we're more concerned with what Maria looks like. In Spanish, they're more concerned that she's a human being. That's right. The noun is the adjective. Another thing. Is
that why it's called the romance language?
Yeah. I always tell people another thing I love about Spanish, they put punctuation at the beginning of the sentence. So if it's a question in English, I read, Maria is a beautiful woman. I got to wait till the very end of the sentence to know it's a
Yeah.
question. But in Spanish, they give me an upside down question mark right at the very beginning of the sentence. So I'm like, Maria es una mujer hermosa. Same thing with an exclamation. In English, I have to wait till the end of the sentence. Maria is a beautiful woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Spanish, I know right from the very beginning because it gives me an upside down exclamation. Maria es una mujer hermosa, esta sábado gigante. And so again, I think if we just frame it, people get so defensive, and I'm like, I don't think we need to be defensive. I think we need to look at what's best for the kid,
Mhm.
And I think you were just thrown in on the deep end. I mean, that's one way to learn English. If nobody else speaks Spanish, well, there you go. You're going to learn English.
Yeah.
I mean, there are situations you could live your entire life in this country having never spoken a word of English, and you could
Mm.
prosper. I mean,
I don't like that.
I get students in East LA that they could run their family's Mexican restaurant, never learn a word of English. But I think
Same thing in Miami,
yeah,
people in
absolutely.
Miami are thinking,
Yeah.
I don't need to
I
learn
was just
it.
in Miami. There was signs on some windows that said English spoken here. I'm like, well, that's nice. I think English is important. I think this is something all of us can agree on, but I don't think it has to be at the expense of home languages because language is closely tied to culture, and people often take offense if you're insulting the language, you're insulting their culture. I mean, that's the other thing I tell people. I'm like, it drives me nuts that I see foreign dignitaries come to the United States and they always speak English, but I've yet to see an American president go abroad and attempt to speak Spanish or German or French or something like that. And I don't know why people freak out. I mean, I'm safe and secure in being an American, and I speak English and I speak Spanish poorly. Even when I spoke Spanish well, though, Rafael, with parents, I would always act like I didn't speak it very well because I wanted them to feel better about their English. And they'd always say, "Oh, so sorry, me English no good." I'm like, "Your English is fine. I understand everything you're saying. As a matter of fact, I understand you better than some of the people born in this country."
Yes.
So I think that's the way. That's kind of my approach to everything. Is let's laugh about it. Let's figure out like the silliness behind these things, but let's figure out, well, what's the way of moving forward. And I love examples like, I mean, Rafael, your experience is incredible. I mean, to come at age 8 to America without speaking a word of English. I mean, those are the stories I want to be reading on the front page of the paper. Like, no wonder people are suffering from depression. It's because they're always reading about negative things. They say garbage in, garbage out. I'm like, no. Keith Harrell, wonderful speaker, he passed away a few years ago. He used to say garbage in, garbage stays. You tell a person they're going to fail long enough, they start to believe it. But here's the benefit. You tell a person they're going to succeed long enough, they start to believe that. And that's what your audience is benefiting from is, okay, how do I learn how to have that mindset? Whether it's in martial arts or business or in other athletics or whatever, how do I have that kind of mindset?
Yeah. One of the things that you had me thinking is when they told you to go figure out who the kids are, where they're from, and what grades they belong. Did you pick me out? Because at 8 years old, I was put in first grade. I was. And it was because they obviously knew I didn't know the language. And you know what? They did me a service. Because if they would have put me in the correct grade, I would have maybe stumbled with the language. I caught up. But I caught up because I loved learning.
Yeah.
But, and I graduated at 18. Otherwise, I would have graduated at what, 21?
Yeah.
So for me, it was, okay. And at first, I didn't even know I was in first grade till later on. I'm like, okay. But what wound up happening is, what do you do with adversity? How do you approach it? Do you just, take it at face value? Or do you say, you know what? Okay, this is what it is. And this is what I'm going to do about it. And that's why, for me, learning has always been huge. I am, and I tell everyone, tell my clients, tell my students, tell anybody, I am a sponge. And at the end of the day, I have to wring myself out so I can get new knowledge tomorrow. So I start as a fresh sponge every single day. You're teaching me things. Thank you for being on my show. I truly appreciate it. So when we think about the experiences you've had, and one thing that is very impressive that you're doing is that you're recalling stories and you're telling them as if they just happened.
Mm.
And I appreciate that because you're remembering the kids' names. You're remembering Fernando. You're remembering, whatever, Maria, whoever they were. And because they touched something in you, they touched the child in you so that you would remember them because they impacted your life. And a lot of people, they see people who maybe, because people are looking always to keep up with the Joneses.
Mm.
Meanwhile, the Joneses don't even care about you. Right? So stop thinking about the Joneses and think about the people around you that you can help elevate. Because the more we can elevate someone else, the higher we go. And we don't elevate someone by stepping on them either, right?
Yeah, I mean, you just made me think of that old phrase: when you're 18, you care what everybody thinks about you. When you're 40, you don't care what anybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, you realize nobody was thinking about you.
Exactly. I realized that at a very young age because who did care about me,
Mm.
right? So I always tell everybody, you need to care about you. You need to look in the mirror and love that person because guess what? I've had so much adversity in my life. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to be here with you today.
Yeah.
So, it's that positivity that we have to drive ourselves to. We have to take ourselves to the water. We have to drink the water, right? We can't wait for someone else to offer because sometimes it'll never be offered.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there, Raphael. I mean, you got to get comfortable with you. You're going to be stuck
Mhm.
with you your entire life.
Wherever I go, there I am.
Yeah, and every day you have that choice. Am I going to focus on the light or the darkness? I mean, when I speak at school districts, a lot of teachers will be offended that I'm giving all these funny stories and positive things. I'm like, oh, do you want to hear the sad stories? I can tell you the sad stories.
Nobody
I
wants
think
to.
there's too much sadness in the world, but I mean, so I tell them the story. I'm like, oh, when my best day when I first started teaching elementary school was at Christmas that first year. I decided I bought boxes of dominoes for all my students. And so I gift wrapped every box of dominoes, put a candy cane on it, and I gave all the kids their boxes of dominoes that day. I figured, oh, this is a great present. It's a good math objective. They can learn counting and stuff. And what did the kids do? They're throwing them at each other. They're eating them, you know. And then I see one of my little boys, Gonzalo, and Gonzalo refuses to open up his present. I'm like, Gonzalo, why don't you open up your present? He's like, oh, I want something under the tree this year.
Aw,
That was my best day. I'm like,
that was incredible.
do
And
you want to hear the sad stories? I don't want a sad story. I want to hear the happy stories.
yeah, yeah. But in that happy story is a sad one, because if you look at it, I mean, the fact that you gave him something to look forward to because prior to that, maybe he didn't have it.
Yeah,
So, you impacted his life just by that one little gesture, right?
yeah. You
And
hope.
to many people, you're like, why are you even going to bother with that? It's not worth it. But meanwhile, it was.
Sounds like you got New York background music
I
there.
have lots of New York background music and, a city that never sleeps
I love it.
and a person that doesn't sleep right here.
Great city. Love it.
So tell me, are you still teaching kindergarten?
No, no. I go around the world. I speak, and now I'm doing a lot more of coaching executives and entrepreneurs how to get better at their speaking, and I love it.
Yes.
And every now and then I still will speak to students to get them pumped up. I'll be speaking in Hawaii here pretty soon,
Oh, nice.
pumping up the kids about reading. It was great. I had to when I was in India. And I love India. India's incredible because when you're in American audiences, you see people doing this. When you're in India, everybody is sitting there like this.
Yes.
It's crazy. I mean, I was speaking. I was at a school, an all-girls school, 5,000 girls,
Mm.
and these two girls come up to me at the end, and one wants to be a doctor, one wants to be a lawyer. I'm like, that's great. Are you going to go to university here in India, or maybe you go to Great Britain or the United States? Like, oh, we can't leave India. We're girls. I'm like, get back in that auditorium. I got them all back in. I'm like, now is your moment, ladies. I mean,
Mm.
within within the next 5 years, India is going to become the largest country on the planet in terms of population. I mean, you're a very young democracy. You're just over 75 years old. Yet you've already elected a woman prime minister. America still hasn't elected a woman president. I'm like, right now, there are twice as many women in India as there are people in the United States. There are actually more women in India with a graduate degree than there are people in the United States. And I looked at those young ladies. I'm like, hey, you just made it my mission. The next prime minister, the next CEO, and the next really good one out of this audience. Don't let anybody. I've always told that to my students. I'm like, sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. And now let's go make this world a better place. I mean, these are the things I want my kids to know all the time.
Oh my gosh, love it, love it. You know, thinking about the difference that, you know, the spoken word can make in someone's world and their life, the impact they can have, but then also the written word. And I want to get into the written word because you've written, I know I was kidding before, but you wrote a lot of books, 16 books. I want to know what inspired you to write even your first book.
I wanted to see my name on the spine.
There you go. Perfect answer.
And it killed.
So this
killed me, Rafael. The first book I wrote, I was so excited. I was so excited. I co-wrote it with this pretty big person in the education world. His entire contribution to the book was putting his name on the book and writing his biography. That was it. And I was so excited for my book to come out. And then it turned out it was spiral bound. So my name wasn't on the spine. I was so angry. And so that's what prompted me to write the second book, because I wanted my name on the spine. So now I have a whole shelf of books with my name on the spine. That's what prompted
me. Is that how you write up that contract? If my name is not on the spine, I'm not writing that book?
I will from now on.
What was the title of your first book? And what was the emphasis on education, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it was on elementary education. It's something that put you to sleep even listening to the title. It was about vocabulary strategies in the classroom for classroom teachers. I've written 3 books on teaching vocabulary to students. That's how I know all that.
That excites me.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I love it. I mean, you got me talking about that earlier where I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about where languages come from and how they influence one another. I love that. And then, I made a turn around 10 years ago. I really started to, because besides schools, then I started having businesses ask me to speak for them. And I realized, I need to be able to offer business people books that can help them. And so that's where now my books are a little bit more general. The last book I wrote, I was sharing with you, was called Leadership Begins with Motivation.
Hold that up again.
Yeah. So this is a book.
Nice.
I wrote this book.
Show me the spine.
Yeah, there you go. The spine. Dr. Danny Brassell, all this good stuff. I love this.
There you
go. I grew up listening to Paul Harvey on the radio. Paul Harvey passed away a couple of years ago at the age of 325 years old. But I love Paul Harvey because he always would come on the radio at 12:15 and he'd say, "I'm Paul Harvey with the rest of the story." And he'd tell you these stories. You're always trying to figure out who's he talking about or what companies he's talking about. But you and I discussed earlier, like, when I would read those stories to students, a lot of the stories are about like JCPenney and Sears, and my kids are like, what's Sears? So I decided, I need to write an updated version. And so this book has people like Sarah Blakely and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And actually, completely unintentionally, this was interesting, Rafael. After reading the book, I'm like, wait a sec. So many of my examples are of white male Americans, and that was unintentional. And so the book I'm writing right now, almost all the examples are of minority, female, and international people that came to great things. You'll like, this is a Paul Harvey one. You'll like this because I was in New York just a few weeks ago speaking to a middle school, and I got the students all pumped up because I'm like, I don't know if you know this, but New York City, before it was called New York City, it was called New Amsterdam, because the Dutch settled there first. Well, the British back in 1664, they were trying to take over the entire eastern seaboard. And so they invaded New Amsterdam, and the Dutch surrendered without firing a shot. And so the British started making fun of the Dutch, and pretty soon everything negative in society became Dutch. And some of those expressions have lasted in the English language now for over 350 years. So for example, when you say you're going Dutch on a date, it means you both pay. I'll be a Dutch man's uncle is not a nice thing to say to a person. A Dutch wife meant she was a prostitute. Dutch
Really?
courage meant you're drunk. But there's one thing the British used to say to the Dutch, which infuriated them. You know how every ethnic group has a type of food we like to associate with that ethnic group?
Right.
Well, the Dutch, they really like cheese. And so the British started going around calling the Dutch John Cheese. And this made the Dutch so angry, they started calling the British John Cheese in Dutch. Yankees. You know, Yankees.
Yeah.
And that is the rest of the story. Oh, I love that.
Too funny, too funny. So, you know, you kept writing books, kept writing books, kept writing books. And I love the fact that you reread your own books, because sometimes, and you know, one of the things that I do, I journal a lot. And I journal, and then I re-journal from what I wrote, and then I re-journal from what I rewrote, and then I've put into a final journal. So I've written like so many books, if you will, but I've never published. So eventually I will, right?
I'll help you. I'll get you published in 2 months. I will guide. I just did that with a guy. He's been trying to write his book for 20 years. He coached with me for 2 months. His book's done.
There you go. That's it. So we'll have to talk more. But here's the thing, right? And I like the fact that you reread your book and then you realize something, that you just had mostly white males. And then you said, wait a minute, our world, and you've been talking about this over and over and over on this podcast, about how diversity has really changed the world, and especially in the US. And then you realize that, and you said, wait a minute, I got to do that with my next book, because it's all the different cultures, it's all the different beliefs, it's all the different ideas that make up our world. It's not one idea, thank God it's not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
think about it. If we were all the same, we'd all be dead, because COVID would have wiped us out, because we would have all been the same. We should be embracing the diversity.
yeah, absolutely. And you know, Hitler would have ruled, and all that junk would have been out. But
great.
you know, thinking about, you decided 10 years ago to start changing what you were writing about, so that you had more content for your audience. So you're listening to your audience. And who would you say your audience is today?
Well, it's very broad, Rafael. You know, I speak still at schools, trying to remind the teachers and the principals why they're important, why they shouldn't quit, that we really need them. When I'm speaking to corporate, I speak often on workplace culture. How do we build teams that are going to be unstoppable? What are the secrets to success? You know, working together. And then when I'm speaking with, you know, the book I'm writing right now is geared towards helping people become better speakers, and not to be, I mean, I do coach people that are actually professional speakers, or people that want to become professional speakers, but I'm more passionate about working with executives, trying to figure out how can my spoken communication improve my life in business and at home. So I speak to different audiences, and so different audiences require different types of books.
Nice. So one of the things that I'm doing lately, I have with the kids, I have called a SWAT team. So SWAT means Special Winning Attitude Team, right?
I like it.
And for all of summer, I've been doing public speaking with them. I've been teaching them every Saturday how to get their message out, because if they're looking to become leaders, they need to be able to impact their knowledge onto someone else. So public speaking is a huge thing. And I try to get them to communicate, because you got some of these kids that they come in, their heads are down, but they want more. So I'm giving them more. And in this whole thing, I have 2 dads who are also joining in, because their kids are in it. And they just like, oh, you go in there. I'm like, why don't you guys join us? And so now they're doing the assignments as well. Right? One of us is a lawyer and the other one's an engineer. And they're both loving what I'm doing with the kids, but they're also going, well, this is also good for me. Because, you know, when we think about public speaking, I mean, job interview, if you can't speak, what kind of job are you going to get? If you're just going to go, oh, did you look at my resume? That's not enough, right? Sometimes you have to tell them about you, what you're looking for. And to me, I always tell anybody who's going for an interview, don't just let them interview you. You interview them. It's
Absolutely.
you're going to spend time with these people. Make sure it's the right place for you. So everything, when we think about everything, comes down to public speaking. You want to ask somebody on a date, you're going to get better dates if you know what to say. Everything, negotiations,
It's a
everything.
numbers game.
Sometimes it is, right? But even like little kids, right? They don't quit. Mom, why this? Dad, why that? Why? And like I said earlier, adults put a stop to it, but we can't. And I tell the kids, one of the things I always say to them, listen, people are always going to tell you to stop asking why. Do me a favor. Never stop asking why. And if they don't want to hear it, don't ask why, but in your mind, ask why.
Hmm.
And always look for the real answers. You know, Danny, I'm going to tell you something that I'm doing, and I love the fact that you are making that real deep impression on people about reading, because you have thereadinghabit.com, and I love that. So one of the things that I do with the little guys is I have a challenge in class, and then sometimes I also have student of the day, whoever did the best, whoever listened the most, and all that stuff. And then at the end, I have a big basket, and I have toys in it, and I have what we call Sifu coins. I used to call them gold coins, and that one of my mentors said to me, "Why are you calling them gold coins? Call them Sifu coins." I'm like, I love it. I'm going to do that. So Sifu coins, and the kids can get enough Sifu coins to purchase. I have a row of books, all
Ah,
kinds of cool books.
I love it.
They can buy a book, but they can't. Their parents can't buy the book. No, they can't even bring me money. They
Mm.
have to bring me seafood coins. So they have to not only earn it, but now I'm also teaching them about finance. They have to save it, and then they have to set a goal. So this happens in every class. Like yesterday, I had one of the kids. When it comes to the younger kids, they don't get it as much. Like 3, 5 year olds. They're like, I want that toy. I'm like, take it. It's yours. But the other kids, when they go, oh, I can get that book, I want that book. And then I got kids like, for 6 coins you get this book, 8 coins you get this book, 10 coins is the most I do, and then they get these other cool books. And I got kids going, I only got 7 coins, I can't wait. I said, are you waiting for 8 coins or 10? They're like, I want 10, I want that book over there. I'm like, all right, keep going, keep doing good. So impacting that desire to read, right? Earning it, if you will, because it is a privilege. It is a privilege to be able to read. It is a privilege to pick up a book. And I had Alex Strathby on my podcast, and he helps authors, get their books well known out there on Amazon. And he was talking about the impact that the written word can do for someone, but the fact that even $20, $30 can get you so much knowledge, but and you can hire a coach just through their book.
Mm.
So and tell me the latest title of your book, and tell me a little bit about it.
I'm not going to give either. I have 2 books I'm writing right now, and I can't give either title because I don't
How
have
about the last one you wrote?
the last one was Leadership Begins with Motivation, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm actually really, because I'm writing one book about it's like Leadership Begins with Motivation, only it's focused on minorities, females, and international examples. And then the book I'm writing about speaking is I actually love both titles, and I don't want to lose
Nice.
them.
Don't do it. Don't do it. But I definitely want you to, come back and definitely share those books with us. What would you say when you start to write a book? Is the book fully written before you start, or is it a work in progress?
That's a great question, Rafael. So there's 2 different processes. The easiest book I ever wrote was based on one of my popular keynotes, which is called A Baker's Dozen of Lessons Learned from the Teaching Trenches. And I'd given that speech like 150 times. And so when I wrote the book took me 3 days to write. It was crazy. Other books, like the book I'm writing right now on different success examples around the world, It's taking me a lot longer because I'm having to do a lot of research. I just did a story about these. You'll love it. This is a great story. So there's these two women in this diner, Martha and Agnes, sharing coffee, and they're both choreographers. And Agnes has just opened her third musical on Broadway, and fans seem to like it, but the critics have just panned it. And so she thinks she wants to close the show. And Martha's like, no, you can't close the show. It's not for you to judge your own work. Others can judge your work, but it doesn't matter, because if you shut down this show, the world loses it. There's only one of you. There's never been another one of you, and there's never going to be another one of you. So you need to keep this show open. And so Martha, the woman that encouraged her friend Agnes, Martha was Martha Graham, who's known as the mother of modern dance. She won the Kennedy Center honors. She won Presidential Medal of Freedom. And Agnes, her friend, was Agnes DeMille. And she also won those honors, and she wound up becoming the first woman to have 3 successful musicals on Broadway at the same time. And the show that she decided not to close down, she renamed it to Oklahoma.
Oh, wow. Yeah, pretty cool.
I mean, it's not for. I mean, I wrote another one the other day. It was about this Italian guy, and he's writing to his buddy Giuseppe. He's like, "Oh, my back is killing me. My ass is sore. I've been inhaling fumes for 4 years. I am so miserable. I've never been more miserable in my life. Alas, Giuseppe, I am not a painter. I am a sculptor." The letter was signed Michelangelo right after he finished painting the Sistine Chapel.
Nice. So, Danny, you have 2 books in the works. You're helping coaches, or should I say leaders, right? Become better.
Yep.
Through public speaking. I think public speaking will definitely impact everyone's life. I mean, communication at home will probably be a lot better.
Absolutely.
Communication with your employees will be a lot better. Communication with your colleagues will be a lot better. Just communication overall. And sometimes so many people claim they're misunderstood. I wonder why.
Yeah, I think what a good coach does is they get you over that hump. I mean, Tiger Woods, he has a putting coach, he has a short game coach, he has a driving coach, he has a mental coach. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, you have that framework. You have it. It's inside of you. My job is to make it a little bit better, and so one of my specialties, I believe in yes and. Like, oh, that's really great what you have. And here's another possibility. And have you considered, I was working with a woman the other day, and her speech, she's doing a TED talk, and she starts off with this song. She's got a beautiful singing voice, and she ends with a song. And I said, well, wait a sec. Why have you considered changing the lyrics to the song so the song actually tells a story during the talk? Oh, that's a good idea. I'm like, oh, have you considered maybe at the beginning, because you were talking about how you had a lot of self-doubt when you were younger, why don't you start singing like you're a little kid and not very good, and then by the end of the talk, then you give us your beautiful voice that you have. She's a Broadway actress. So I'm like, oh. And she's like, oh, that's a different way. I'm not here. I just like to give lots of different ideas. And like when I run my mastermind, business leaders always say, Danny, you always give 10 ideas and 9 of them are just completely crazy, but one of them is worth millions of dollars. And I'm like, but that's what it is it's throwing spaghetti at the wall. What's going to stick? How do we make this a little bit better? And again, I'm very good at showing people how to engage the audience and how to make it funnier or something. A woman, she was just talking about, she's talking about social media and how it can be positive and negative. And so when she said the word dopamine, I'm like, oh, well, that's you can easily turn that into a humorous line where, you click on social media to hear positive things, and every now and then somebody writes something negative, and it makes you feel like a dope because they're so mean to you on social media. And she's like, oh, I never thought. I'm like, okay, we can just play with the language. I mean, there's easy ways. You don't even have to be funny to add humor. I mean, I was with a dry guy once, and he's like, well, I don't have a sense of humor. And I'm like, well, I used to do that with my little ones. I'm like, I would just look at them. I'm like, Do you want to see the fastest smile in the West? Do you want to see it again? Do you want to see it again? The kid's like, what? I'm like, oh, you're missing it. It's the fastest smile. You know, adding humor, but it's not like I'm not changing anything. I mean, like Al Gore was kind of stiff. And I thought what was smart was whoever coached him said, well, why don't you embrace the stiffness? I'm like, that's what I always tell people. I'm working with a guy right now, and Puerto Rican, has a very thick Puerto Rican accent. And I said, don't run away from it. Embrace it. Make fun of it. People are going to love you for having that accent because you're making fun of yourself. I mean, if you really want to impress anybody when you're speaking, don't tell them about your successes. Tell them about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you show your own vulnerability, the more they're going to love you.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. You're saying be original. Don't be an imposter.
Yeah.
Right? Be you.
Mm-hmm.
Be you. That to me, that's, you know, showing up. And like we said earlier, no matter where you go, there you are. And then who are you presenting to other people? Do you present different people to different audiences? Or do you, because then that's hard to keep up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or do you just come authentic every single time and just be who you are?
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways to improve your speaking. The first one is to watch lots of speakers, you know, so I'll watch politicians, I'll watch televangelists, I'll watch comedians, you know, I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups. One of the secret ninja tricks I teach my people is I'm constantly watching award shows, because most of the people, when they win their award, they only have 45 seconds to give a speech. And I want to see, oh, can you actually make it interesting in 45 seconds? Because most people just go, I want to thank God and I want to thank the Academy and everybody. Yeah. But every now and then somebody gives a really good speech. And I'll give you an example. I was watching the Academy Awards this year, and unfortunately the Will Smith thing overshadowed everything. Right. But there was one guy, and I don't remember, I can't even remember. It was some technical award. He was a smaller award. And so people aren't really paying attention. And he gets up there and he says, thank you. He's like, a lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. For example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter, and she said, well, Academy Award nominee Thomas Merton. And everybody was laughing hysterically. And the point is, Rafael, this is a nothing guy who I guarantee you after that speech, all of a sudden Harrison Ford and Brad Pitt are rushing up to him. They want to meet this guy because he gave them a story. My own son is giving a speech today in school, and he didn't ask me for help, and I wish he had asked me for help, because he started reading it to me, and he's like, it has to be on a famous person, and he was just reciting facts about this person. I'm like, but nobody's going to remember that. If you want people to remember things, you got to give them a story. People remember stories. Walt Disney said, people think in pictures. He's right about that. I've never written a speech in my life. What I do is I illegally download images off of Google, and I put them together in a PowerPoint, and then those pictures guide me on where I'm going to go with my presentation. But if you actually physically write the speech, too often I see people, they get nervous, they forget a word. Oh, it was supposed to be here. And that was one of the tips I gave my son today. I'm like, you're the only person that knows what your speech is. You can't screw it up.
That's right.
You screw it up. They haven't heard it before, and you change it.
Yeah, one of the things I love that. One of the things I tell a lot of my students, no matter where they are, if they're performing, I'll say, just think of fudge, just fudge. Yeah. Everybody likes fudge. Doesn't matter the shape. They're still gonna go, that was yummy, and it doesn't matter if it looks terrible, but as long as it tastes good, right? So it's that delivery, right? It's the story. And, you know, one of the things that I'm teaching the kids about, you know, doing their public speaking, they have to actually, we're coming up with a presentation very soon. They started doing it, and they're very, very dry. And one little girl has a great instance where she actually learned to use her martial arts to defend herself. And the whole theme for everybody to come through is how Kung Fu changed my life. And she just came and she goes, a kid on the bus hit me, he pushed me, so I used my Kung Fu, and that's it. I'm like, wait a minute, there's a lot more to that story. I recall your parents calling me and asking me if it was okay if they treated you to ice cream afterwards because you defended yourself. I said, look how much your parents believe in you, that instead of you getting in trouble, they even told, because the principal of the school wanted them to punish her. And the parents turned around and said, no, we're taking her out for ice cream. That was the best thing ever. And I said, you got to use that in your
Absolutely.
story to show how your parents support your actions because you did the right thing. You know, you were suffocating and you actually had to get out of a situation
Yeah.
and nobody else was helping you. So yeah, it's creating those stories, right? To make them real, to make somebody bring them in. And I love the fact that we've had a conversation about almost everything today, haven't
Yeah.
we?
We've covered a lot.
We sure
Absolutely.
did.
Well, here's a quick tip for your audience. If people really want to get better at speaking, what I would encourage everybody to do is tonight sit down with a libation of your choice, nice glass of something,
Water.
a pen and paper, and I want you to write down every story that's ever happened in your life. And I don't mean write the entire story. I mean write down triggers, like the time I locked myself out of the car in Costco, the time that Dad spilt mustard on him. And what you'll do is you'll come up with, and all throughout business, throughout your childhood, everything. What will happen is you'll come up with about 400 or 500 stories. And then what I want you to do is then start looking at that story and figuring out, well, does this actually is a story about support.
Mm,
Oh, this is a story about responsibility. Oh, here's a story about accountability. Oh,
right.
here's a story about loyalty. You know, because then you can drop those in whenever you're trying to make a point. There's nothing that makes me happier than when I hear a person make a point by telling a story that has nothing to do with that point that they're trying to make. But you're like, oh, that was a really good way of doing that. It's a clever way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great advice. And you're right. From the age of even when you can recall to the age of 10, you probably have hundreds of
Oh
stories,
yeah,
right? So I love that idea. Tell me, you you decided to give gifts today.
Oh
Why?
yes, yeah. As
Why? Why? You're so kind. Tell me.
I
It's
it's a
free
thank you to
gift.
you and your audience for
Um,
enduring with listening to my stories. Yeah, if you go to the website freegiftfromdanny.com, again, freegiftfromdanny.com, you have it right there. I
mhm.
love that. I'm going to give you 2 freebies. First of all, I'm going to give everybody a complimentary e-copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed. This
Wow.
is a book I wrote for a school principal who was trying to keep his faculty and staff positively engaged. So I said, okay, I'll write you a book. And so every week I give you a concept, an inspirational quote, an inspirational story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy because you're an adult. So I also give you a children's picture book recommendation, demonstrates the same concept. You can read that in 5 minutes. I'm also going to give everybody access to a 5-day reading challenge I did last summer for about 700 parents online.
Mm,
Where every day for 5 consecutive days, you're with me for an hour, and I'm giving you all kinds of ideas on how to get your kid excited about reading. That's really my passion. The more excited we get kids to read, the more likely they are to read, and the more they read, the better they get. I mean, that's what I could have kissed you, Rafael, for that story of you've turned reading from a chore into a reward. I mean, I
right.
love that Pizza Hut does the Book It program, but if I ever meet the CEO of Pizza Hut, I'm going to make a suggestion. The way that program works now is kids read books and they get rewarded with pizza. If I ran the program, it would be exactly the opposite. Every time a kid came into Pizza Hut to eat some pizza, I'd reward him with a book.
Mm,
You didn't even realize you're doing it. You're sending a very different message to the kid that reading is the reward, and
right.
this is something to be honored and celebrated every day. So I love that. I feel like a Baptist in your front row, Raphael, saying amen to everything you're saying. I so agree with it.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I recall and I used to enjoy so much is sitting down at night and reading books to my children, even before they can even read or just or even speak,
Mhm.
right? You know, they're 16 months old. I'm still flipping books with them, you know, Jump Over the Moon and so forth. One of the books that I give every little one that 3 and a half and up that they come to my class their first day or you know within the first 2 weeks or whatever, I give them a book about words and how they have meaning, right? So it's like hugging and this and that, and so it's a positivity, and the parents are like, you gave my kid a book? I'm like, yeah, I want you guys to read it with them every night and get them to have that love, the long love language that we stop using later on. Because I tell the kids, oh, here's the other cool thing that you might enjoy. We have 3 bows at the beginning of my kids' classes. One is we pay respect to our ancestors, so we say I'm a future black belt, And then the next one, we say respect, courtesy, and honor. And the last bow, and we do this at the beginning of class and at the end of class. It's the only time we bow. We turn around to our family, whoever brought us that day, and we say thank you.
Wow.
And the parents are like, my kid's thanking me. I said, yeah, get used to it. Because
I love that. Jeez.
how many people, I just went to your free gift from Danny.com, by the way. Great. I love it. So how many people call their parents?
Yeah.
Right. When my parents were alive, I called them regularly. And the other day I saw something on I think it was a social media post, and it said, if you get either one of these, you're very lucky. And it was a little picture of saying mom calling, and the other one said dad calling.
Mm.
Because if you have that, it's like, wow. And once in a while, after my mom passed, I was like, oh, I got to call mom. I'm like, oh, I can't call mom.
Yeah.
But I can still talk to her, right? So cherish those moments with the people that are around you, and always remember to say, I love you, I care about you, and how can I help you today? Right?
Well said.
What would you say is, you've given so many tips, advice, amazing stories. I think that when you and I get together one day, we're just going to have a great, great big belly laugh, right?
It's going to go on for days.
I know. I'm looking forward to it, by the way.
Wow.
We're going to have a big meeting with everybody who's ever been on my show. It'll be a great day because there'll be hundreds of people. One of the things that
you should do that. You should do that, Rafa. I do that with the people that when I coach, I usually get people in a group of 8, and then we do a follow-up 2 weeks later where everybody gets to see at what stage people are in their presentations. But then 6 months later, we have a big hullabaloo to celebrate one another's success and how far we've come. Because I think you're right. I don't think people get caught up in the process and they forget to celebrate all the progress that they've made.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for today. I mean, gosh, what a blast I've had. Thank you, my friend. Any last words? I mean, we had Ray up. He said greetings and salutations, and he loves, I think, everything that you said just as much as I do. So
one of my mentors was Charlie Tremendous Jones. He had a great saying I love. He said, you're the same today as you will be in 5 years, except for 2 things: the people you meet and the books you read. So make sure to surround yourself with people that lift you up, and make sure to read lots of things that fill you with positivity. That's how. Thanks for all that you do.
Oh, I appreciate it. And do me a favor, everybody. If you can't afford a book, the library, people, the library. Until you can afford one, go to the library. When you can afford it, go ahead and buy them. And do me a favor, pick up Danny's books. Any one of them, I'm sure, will be a lot of fun. And I can't wait. I'm looking forward to reading your book, my friend.
Cool. Thank you, Rafael.
All right. Enjoy. Have an amazing day.
God bless.
God bless.